Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going to be taking a look at Dimash Could I Bergen, and this is coming from 2019. I just want to make a quick amendment to this video because whilst this video has been rendering, which is a long process, I've been looking through lots of Dimash videos and I managed to find the one from the Chinese talent show, so it's definitely live. You can hear him singing and the breath hitting the mic, and he's a lot more animated. You can see the effort and expression he's putting into his singing. So like I mentioned in this video later on, it would be stupid to try and pretend that somebody could sing at this level because you're just setting yourself up for a fall. But everything in this video is still valid. All the points are still true, but just to let you guys know that I know Dimash can sing. But let's get back to the video.
Исчезает до утра. Мы с тобой два беглеца, убегаем от себя. Я слышу шорох и шаги, нежный шепот вопреки. Я не чувствую земли, лечу. Знай, у любви на небе есть печаль. Твое сердце в руки взять, скачай. Знай, у влюбленных два крыла, в небе бьют колокола. Любовь рвет сердца. Кровь засывает без тебя. У меня в гостях мечта, у нее твои глаза. Мои чувства бьют набат. Я ищу горящий взгляд. Невозможно описать твой взгляд. Знай, у любви на небе есть.
I'm just going to jump in here. Because of the dynamics of the track, you can tell that we're going to be going somewhere different soon vocally. But the thing is that I have to point out, unfortunately, all of the producers watching this particular performance will wonder what that mic is that he's got, because it's so sensitive. It is like a studio mic, a condenser mic. And it's because we are listening to the album version of the track, and if you were to sync up, and I have, the version of the track that is recorded in the studio and this track that is being mimed to here, and by the way, it's not just Dimash who is miming, the whole orchestra are, And if you spotted it in the intro, the way that the violin is being played, the strings on the backing track are continuing, and the violinist stops with the bow, but the strings keep going. You would say to them, it's obvious that they haven't had a lot of experience miming along to this track, so they don't know it particularly well. They're not reading sheet music here because they're in pitch black. They need night vision goggles to read the sheet music in front of them. But just keep that bow going. If you are going to try and mime it authentically, stop when you can hear it stop on the backing track. So that's unfortunate that straight away, if you're eagle-eyed, you'll be able to spot that. The other thing is that I don't know if people are appreciating that this is a mimed performance, certainly by the way that people are getting their phones out and they're all trying to get this recorded. And by the way, I have seen some footage of somebody from the crowd it was a different performance. I've looked at lots of different songs and synced them up with their relevant studio versions. But this other performance that I was looking at, it was a song. Let me just look at the list of songs that I've looked through. It was Love Is Like a Dream that I got up on screen, another performance like this, and I synced it with somebody's footage from the crowd on their iPhone, and again, the file that they're hearing live, I say file, it's an MP3, that they're hearing live is the same as the recorded version, so it was played out of the speakers on the night. So I think because people are holding up their phones and filming it, they must be assuming that it's live. Of course, I'm not saying that Dimash can't sing and that it's all an act, and it would be the most stupid thing ever to try and attempt to put on stage somebody who can't sing that is just going to mime at this kind of level of ability. You'd certainly pitch it somewhere lower so that you could get away with it at some level, but Dimash has got such an amazing voice. Obviously, this is pre-recorded, so we can't really judge it on this. But in terms of the technique and the control that we can hear in that voice, you would certainly pitch it lower if you were trying to fake it. You do have to say that Dimash, in terms of his synchronization and his miming ability, it is really impressive the way that he manages to say all of the vocal phrases pretty much spot on, so people do have trouble spotting that it is lip-synced, and that might be the reason that people assume it's live, is because it's so well done. The other thing that is a bit borderline is having the orchestra there, but also the piano on stage, because you tend to assume that that piano is going to be a live accompaniment for this singer, where that isn't actually the case in this particular case. I like to get a good background of the performer and other songs that have done it. Just so happened that so many songs were sounding exactly like the studio version that I started to sync them up and see how they varied, if any, and they didn't, unfortunately, with the tracks that I looked at in detail, going down to the waveforms. And if you're into production, you'll know what I'm talking about. You zoom into an audio file and you get a particular waveform, which is impossible to duplicate with 2 takes of any particular song, but obviously they're duplicated because it's the same file being played back. The thing that gave it away on the piano, unfortunately, was right at the end. The pianist plays the last note too early so that the note sounds when his hand's in the air. I'm going to put that in the video now so you guys can see it. This is the kind of thing I do, just looking into live versus recorded performances. As you guys know, if you request a video for me to take a look at, if it is live but auto-tuned, or if it is pre-recorded and auto-tuned, or even fully mimed altogether with everything, I'm going to point that out. And it's full disclosure here, exactly the same as when I looked at a video with Miley Cyrus, and it was a pre-recorded version of the song that they were then pretending to play along with, and she was pretending to sing along with. Finally, the last point about the miming backing track thing, I think the thing that does make it a little bit borderline is that at the end of performances, and the ones that I saw that were just the studio recording and miming along to it, that at the front of the stage, people will start giving flowers to Dimash, and they'd be wanting to touch him and take pictures and stuff. It certainly does take the shine off the performance when you know that it was just an MP3 that you were listening to, played through a massive set of speakers. And it's that full disclosure. I'd love to see more of it in the music industry, for the audiences to be told what you're about to hear isn't actually live, But it's great music, but just an appreciation that the instruments aren't being played and the vocals aren't being sung. I'm going to play the audio from this performance and the audio from the studio version of this track. This is No, by the way, so if you guys want to synchronize it yourself at home, then you can do, just a double check, but I'm going to do that for you now. It's going to sound a little bit nasty because it is just the same audio file being repeated. If you listen to a genuine live performance, even if the timing's exactly the same in terms of tempo as the original studio recording, you get a double-tracked sound. It doesn't sound nasty because it's impossible to perfectly replicate the same thing twice, because there are so many factors to be taken into consideration. The room that you're playing in, I'm not going to go through all of them now because it's impossible. There are so many factors. But with all that said, now that we know how the land lies, let's get back into the performance and get into the vocal analysis after the performance is finished.
Сердце в руки взять, встречай, знай, у влюбленных два крыла, в небе бьют колокола, любовь рвет сердце.
And then he collects the flowers for the performance. But this is one of those performances and compositions that if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you probably know what I'm going to say in terms of the journey of the track and the way that it increases in pitch and making sure that the top note is going to be at the end of the song. I just want to point out as well, at 5 minutes and 21, you can rewind it if you want to. There's a little part that is more of a vocal ad-lib. It's on the studio version as well, of course, because this is the studio version. But having those notes in there, when you go really high like Dimash is in that section, you're going to a really small place. There's very little air going through your vocal cords in order to make these really high notes. And Dimash actually turns his head away from the mic, and we can still hear these notes perfectly. I have seen another performance where Dimash, again, it's the studio version, but he's making sure he stays really close to that microphone during that high note. So maybe he edited his technique a little bit to make it more believable for that high note, because singing off to the side, you're never going to hear it. A good example of that voice thinning out as you ascend, and an extreme example, is Mariah Carey. The way that she can get into her whistle voice at will, but in order to make that sound, it is such a small sound because of the air going through the vocal cords. It's such a light sound. And if you've ever seen Mariah sing that live, you'll see that she almost puts the microphone in her mouth for it to pick up that chord coordination, that tiny sound, that whistle that's being made by the vocal cords. As a rule of thumb, the bigger the sound, the thicker the tone, the lower you want to be in your range in order to achieve that. Because as you ascend in range, you need to thin out the voice because it's taking up a thinner section of your vocal cords. They're zipping up. So you want less air going through those vocal cords as well. So that's why as you ascend, and as we ascend here with Dimash, listen to his vocal quality as it ascends, because it starts to sound female. You lose all of that bottom end thickness and tone because the notes are getting so high. They have to be thin to get up there. You're never ever going to hear notes like Dimash is singing, especially at the top end. We're talking about a C and D6 here. Go to your piano again if you want to find those notes, because they are so high, you cannot put loads of air through your vocal cords. You'd never get them. Just to mention about the journey vocally, purely in pitch terms, because in other videos I've said about singers who have managed to take their voice up 1 octave, and that gives such a dramatic effect vocally in order to take it to that whole octave higher. Here, we're actually starting on D sharp 3 in terms of the octave, if you want to go to your pianos and find those notes. And the highest note that we hit, or Dimash hits in this performance on the studio version, is a D6. And we started at D sharp 3. So it means that we have gone the best part of -1 note, 3 octaves. And I say that 1 octave is really dramatic. So this is why this sound, this performance, these vocals are so impactful and have such a profound effect, is because of that pure range that has happened throughout the performance and that journey that we've been taken on throughout the performance. Here we've got this classical vibrato, the really wide vocal vibrato that you get with classical performances, and it's another thing that you will find classical singers aren't auto-tuned because their vibrato is so wide, the computer can't figure out which note to snap it to. When I mention about his voice sounding more female as he ascends in pitch, there's a definite crossover point at which that happens, and that's between chest voice, mixed voice, and head voice. Mixed voice is in between those two, a mixture of head voice and chest voice. Even though I'm pointing to chest voice and head voice, a lot of the resonance is in the head. And as you ascend, you have to thin out that sound to take it higher. And a lot of women talk in their head voice, just naturally. Obviously, when they go through puberty, it's not quite as dramatic as guys when they have testosterone and their voices drop significantly. If you are watching this video at home, and guys, you want to feel the effect of the resonance and vibration of your chest voice, just hold your hand on your chest and you'll be able to feel the vibration from chest voice down low. Just go as low as you can and make a really loud noise and you'll feel it. With women, they tend to talk in head voice, and if you hear a woman talking in her chest voice, it can take you back a little bit because you weren't expecting that voice. It's just something naturally we expect women to talk in their head voice. So when Dimash does start to sing really high, it sounds female because vocal cords are vocal cords. They work that way. You can't take a massive sound to those heights. Obviously with women, their voice is going to sit naturally higher than a guy's, usually about an octave above the average guy's voice. But having that smaller sounding head voice that women talk with is interesting because when you hear a female vocalist sing in her chest voice and she does it well, it's so different and it can really knock you back. For example, Karen Carpenter, one of those classic timeless vocals, really excelling in chest voice, low down in her range, and it gave it such a unique sound. And then when she spoke, she'd be speaking in her head voice. There are techniques that you can learn to use with your voice in order to get a fuller sounding voice in those head voice tones. And the voice is something that you can train for years and years, your whole life, and never master it. There are so many intricacies to your vocal cords, the muscles around your vocal cords. I don't want this video to go on for too long, but I want to address a question that a lot of people have asked, saying, how can Dimash sing like this? And the answer to that question is, with the vocal cords, they always work in the same way. It is connection in terms of bringing those vocal cords together and your control of air and the flexibility of your vocal cords. And it's something that varies from person to person. Some people who have sung for years might not have trained their voice as much as classical singers. By the way, Dimash would have trained his vocals endlessly throughout his whole life in order to get to this level. The one thing that he has on his side is genetics and having very flexible vocal cords. You can imagine that a sprinter, for example, in their muscles, they have a naturally high number of fast twitch muscle fibers. These are the things inside your muscles that allow you to do things quickly and explosively. The same person with slow twitch muscle fibers in their legs, same age, same height, will not be able to run as fast as the guy who has fast twitch muscle fibers. But the slow twitch muscle fibers, they will be able to run for a longer time without getting tired. So it's just genetics. One body's made one way, the other is made the other way. It's the same for every single part of your body. So with Dimash, he has vocal cords that are so flexible that they can reach these places that other people just can't because their vocal cords aren't as flexible. They are a little bit more rigid, which means that they'll get to a certain point and they haven't got the flexibility, that delicate adjustment to be able to get to those notes. In order to get more texture and expression to his voice, Dimash puts a little bit more air through his vocal cords in sections, but then he'll really close up those vocal cords. Chord closure is what it's called, in order to get a more piercing sound, a really clean tone with very little air. The amount of control he's got over airflow is second to none. And I really mean that, literally second to none, being able to control these super high notes. The pitch that he's hitting, the chord closure is so precise and the airflow is so precise as well. So many people will try and hit notes and just air comes out because it is such a delicate equation, just balancing your air with where your vocal cords are and the note that you're trying to hit. Dimash has perfected it. And with that genetic advantage of having really flexible vocal cords, the control of air, and having all of these textures that he can add at will, that's why his voice is so unique and so standalone, because of the range he's got in terms of taking you on that journey, but then all of these dynamic changes he can make to his voice. And by the way, it is one thing to say all of these things. You can understand the theory in so much depth, but then getting your vocal cords and your airflow to achieve the desired result is still relatively impossible. It's not impossible, you can do it. But like I said, you can study the voice for your whole life and never perfect it. That is the beauty and both the nightmare of singing and learning to sing, is finding the solution to your own personal equation of note and airflow and feeling how much air you need and where you need to place that note in your head in order to hit it consistently and get it to resonate. But a really interesting video here for so many different reasons. Thank you guys for suggesting it in the first place for me to check out. Keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one.